Welcome back to the deep dive. We are jumping into something today that is, it's going to sound a bit contradictory right off the bat.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, because it is somehow the most relatable, human, social anxiety-filled story we have ever covered. But then at the exact same time, it pivots into this mind-bending, reality-shattering look at the actual physics of time.
It's a really unique combination. We're going from a literal panic attack about folding chairs to the concept that the past is, well, that the past is liquid.
Liquid history. I really love that phrasing. So,
Yeah.
get comfortable, maybe check your own chair situation. You will definitely understand why in a minute. And let's get into it. But before we start, we do have to set the ground rules for the show.
Right, the mandatories.
Exactly. So just a quick note, this podcast will be distributed free of charge on all major platforms for educational purposes. We are just here to explore the ideas, unpack the text, and see what we find.
And we definitely need to cite our source for today's deep dive. Specifically, we are looking at session 225. This was recorded on January 19th, 1966.
And that is found in the Early Sessions Book 5 of the Seth material.
Exactly. And we also want to explicitly credit the Seth material and the publisher, New Awareness Network. If you find what we talk about today interesting, you really need to go to the source.
For sure. So here's the hook for today's deep dive. We all have this ingrained idea of the past, right? It's done. It is written in stone. It is essentially a statue in the park of your mind.
You can go look at it, you can polish it, maybe bird droppings land on it over time.
Right, but the statue itself, it doesn't move, it doesn't change shape.
That is the conventional view, yeah. The past is fixed.
Well, what if it isn't? What if the past is actually more like water? What if every single time you remember something, you aren't just looking at a faded photograph of it, but you are physically reaching back and rearranging the atoms of that event?
That is the core metaphysical concept we are tackling today. But, as you mentioned earlier, we don't start there. We actually start with something much more grounded.
We start with a dinner party.
The human comedy of it all. I honestly laughed out loud reading the first part of the session. It is just so, it's just so people.
It really is. So let's set the scene for you. It's January 1966. John Roberts, the author who speaks for the entity known as Seth, has been having a bit of a meltdown before the session begins.
She's acting very strangely. And when the session starts, Seth, this non-physical consciousness, basically comes through and says, "Good evening. I have some humorous preliminary remarks to make about why Jane is freaking out."
I love that Seth has a sense of humor about our petty human dramas. So what actually happened?
Well, a friend named Mark, which is his entity name in the text, though his real name was Bill McDonnell, he dropped by. And he didn't come alone. He brought a guest, a gallery owner.
And Jane does not like this gallery owner at all.
No, she actively dislikes him. But here's where it gets funny. Jane goes into this total frenzy, a complete panic, not because she hates the guy, but because she suddenly convinces herself she doesn't have enough good chairs.
The classic chair panic. I've definitely been there. This sort of, oh no, people are coming over, my furniture is inadequate, my entire life is a sham.
Exactly. She is running around totally desperate to find proper seating. She's obsessing over it. But Seth calls her out immediately. He says this behavior is highly amusing.
Because it obviously wasn't about the chairs.
It is never about the chairs. Seth acts as a psychoanalyst here. He peels back the layer of the ego's defense mechanism. He says Jane knew perfectly well she had plenty of chairs. The chair issue was a total smokescreen.
So what was the real issue? Why the panic?
This gets into the social complexity of the 1960s and Jane's own internal psychology. The gallery owner that Mark brought over, he was black. In the text, Seth refers to him as a Negro, using the standard terminology of that specific time period.
Right. We're just reporting what is in the source material here. And Jane is feeling deeply conflicted about this.
Deeply. Seth explains that Jane didn't want this man in her house. But, and this is the crucial part, she felt incredibly guilty about that feeling. She feared that her dislike of him personally would be interpreted as racial discrimination.
Oh, wow. That is a tangled psychological web. So she dislikes the guy just because she dislikes his personality, but she is terrified that because he's black, people will think she's a bigot.
Precisely. And to prove to herself and to everyone else that she wasn't prejudiced, she overcompensated. She went into this nervous, frenzied, and altogether desperate attempt to make sure he had a good chair. The chair became her symbol of acceptance.
It's like her brain was saying, if I give him the best seat in the house, I can't possibly be a bad person, even though I secretly want him to leave.
Exactly that. But it actually goes even deeper. Seth brings up Jane's childhood. Apparently, she had a very dear childhood friend named Edward Briscoe, who was also black. Seth describes him as having been poor and the victim of circumstances.
So she has this deep nostalgia, this real love for her childhood friend.
Yes. She feels a sort of moral obligation to be kind to all Black people as a way to honor Edward. So now she is in this massive bind. She has a moral mandate to be welcoming, a personal dislike for this specific gallery owner, and a crippling fear of being misunderstood.
And to top it all off, wasn't the mayor coming over?
Yes. The mayor was going to be at this gathering too, and Seth points out this beautiful, somewhat heartbreaking subconscious fantasy Jane was having. She was imagining how impressed her late friend Edward would be if he could see this gallery owner hanging out with the mayor in her living room.
Wow. So she is projecting her dead friend onto this complete stranger.
She totally conflated them. In her subconscious, the gallery owner became Edward. So denying the gallery owner entry felt like betraying her childhood friend. Hence the chair panic.
It is amazing how the human mind works.
Right.
We invent these silly, tangible problems like, I don't have enough chairs, just to avoid dealing with that massive knot of guilt, grief, and social anxiety.
Seth calls it the superficial reasons given by the ego. And we do it all the time. We get mad about the dishes being left out because we are actually afraid of abandonment. We stress about traffic because we secretly hate our jobs.
Yeah, that is incredibly relatable. And Seth also touches on Mark, right? The friend who brought the guest. He didn't really get off scot-free either in this psychological breakdown.
No, not at all. Seth notes that Mark is no over his head psychologically. Mark is trying to help this gallery owner, but Seth says Mark has a subconscious fear of Black people that manifests as a kind of morbid fascination. He says Mark is repelled and fascinated at the same time.
That is a very heavy insight. It's that idea that sometimes the act of helping is actually just someone working through their own internal biases.
Right. Seth says Mark might end up helping himself by turning outward, but it is a dangerous psychological game he is playing.
So that is the human comedy part of the session. We have a dinner party, racial tension, misplaced guilt, and a chair shortage that wasn't even real. It perfectly establishes that our conscious mind is not always the most reliable narrator of what is actually going on.
Which is the perfect setup for the second half of the deep dive. Because if we can't even be honest with ourselves about why we are looking for a chair, how can we possibly understand the true nature of time and memory?
Talk about a pivot. Seth goes from telling Jane to calm down about the living room furniture to casually dropping the fact that everything you know about the past is a lie.
It is a very sharp turn. He just says, let us get back to time.
Okay, let's unpack this, because this is where the chill vibe comes in. Seth starts talking about how we view our own personal history. The conventional view, and honestly the view I think most of us still hold today, is that the child we used to be is still inside us.
Right, like a set of Russian nesting dolls.
Yeah.
Or a fossil trapped in amber. Academic psychology often treats the inner child as this preserved, static entity. They believe the child exists psychologically intact within the adult man.
And Seth says, nope.
He says such is not exactly the case. He admits the child exists in the man, but, and this is key, he says he is not the same child.
What does that actually mean? If I remember my 10th birthday party, isn't that just a recording of the 10-year-old me?
Seth argues that memories are not precise pictures. We tend to think of memory like a video file on a hard drive. You click play and you just watch the footage. But Seth says, quote, each incident is recreated when the memory of it arises.
Recreated. So we aren't playing back a file. We are restaging the entire play from scratch.
Yes. And here is the quote that really stopped me in my tracks. He says, the memory is changed with each recreation and subtly changed.
So every single time I remember that birthday party, I am changing it.
You are altering it, and not just your psychological perception of it. Seth gets into the actual physics of it, or rather the metaphysics. He talks about electromagnetic connections.
Let's dig into that. Electromagnetic connections. What does he mean?
Seth states, quote, the electromagnetic connections themselves that make up any particular event, these connections, even while seemingly intact, have changed. The energy that composes them is not the same.
Okay, so if the energy isn't the same, then the event itself is fundamentally not the same event anymore.
That is the direct implication. He says the past is then continually changed. Nothing stands still. He calls the appearance of stability a total illusion.
This is wild to think about, because we rely on the past for our identity. We say things like, I am this way because this happened to me. But Seth is saying that the thing that happened to you is literally shifting sand.
It suggests that the past is alive. It is evolving alongside us. When you, as an adult, look back at a childhood trauma or even a childhood joy, you are pouring new, current energy into that old mold. You are changing the electromagnetic structure of the past event.
So if I heal from a trauma today, do I literally change the trauma that happened 20 years ago?
According to this theory, yes. You aren't just changing your attitude about what happened. You are physically changing the event's existence in the electromagnetic reality.
That is incredibly empowering and also slightly terrifying.
It creates a real sense of vertigo. Seth says, it is as much an illusion to believe that the past has vanished as it is to believe that the future does not exist.
The past does not vanish. So where is it? Where is it being stored?
It is right here. It's just vibrating at a frequency we aren't currently focusing on.
Which leads us perfectly to the next big concept in this session, simultaneous existence.
Yeah.
This is one of those foundational Seth concepts that is just really hard to wrap your brain around at first.
It is difficult.
Okay.
Because we perceive time as a straight line. Birth, childhood, adulthood, death, point A to point B to point C. But Seth says there is no point where the child ceases and the man begins. He says these are states happening simultaneously. Simultaneously. So the kid version of me is existing right now at the exact same time as this current version of me talking to you.
Correct. But we perceive them in sequence strictly because of our limited focus. Seth uses a slow motion analogy. He says these simultaneous states are perceived in slow motion within your system.
So we are essentially dragging our consciousness through this massive simultaneous reality, and that dragging sensation is what we call time.
That is a fantastic way to put it. And because our focus is so narrow, Seth calls it egotistical perception. We think the moment we just passed is gone forever. We think it vanished. But Seth says that particular moment existed before your egotistical perception of it, and it's constantly being changed by you, even when you no longer consciously perceive it.
Constantly being changed by you. That connects right back to the concept of the inner self.
Yes. He says the inner self can perceive the past and does change it. The inner self doesn't have the same linear limitations as our conscious ego.
And then he drops this really provocative term, inverted time. This is fascinating. The idea of inverted time states that time flows in all directions.
All directions, not just forward like an arrow.
Exactly. Seth says, as each action affects every other action, so time constantly affects itself. This means the future can affect the past. The present affects the past. The past affects the future. It is a vast, interconnected web, not a single straight line.
It's like a spider web where if you pluck one strand, the whole thing vibrates. You don't just vibrate the part of the web in front of you. The part behind you vibrates just as much.
That's a great visual. And Seth says the past moment is never completed.
That is the headline for me right there. The past moment is never completed. It means we are never actually done with anything, which honestly sounds a little exhausting, but it also means we always have a chance to go back and fix things.
It offers a massive amount of hope for redemption and healing. It suggests we aren't just passive victims of a fixed history. We are active participants in a living history.
Seth uses another analogy here that I really liked, the stone skipping analogy.
Oh, yes. He says we skip along the surface of reality, just like hopping from stone to stone across a pond. We touch down on a moment, experience it briefly, and then hop to the next moment.
But the water is still there between all the stones.
Right. We miss the profound depths between the moments. We think the stones are the only reality because that is where our feet touch down. But the continuity we feel isn't because of the moments themselves. Seth says continuity is achieved through the self as it experiences all these different probabilities.
So let me make sure I quote this right. He says, do not regard this hopping from moment to moment as the approximation of time as it actually exists.
Yes, that's the quote.
So we are the thread connecting the beads. The beads aren't actually connected to each other at all. They're only connected to us.
Beautifully put. You are the continuity.
Okay, so we have covered the funny social anxiety with the chairs, and we have covered the deep metaphysical theory of inverted time. Now we really have to talk about the experiment. Because Seth isn't just a philosopher giving lectures. He is, well, he's a psychic entity. And Jane and her husband Robert were constantly testing this to see if it was real.
The envelope tests, these were a very regular part of their sessions.
Let's explain how this worked for the listener who might be new to this setup.
So Robert, that's Jane's husband, would take an object. He would seal it inside a double envelope so it was completely hidden. Jane had never seen the object. She would go into a trance, or Seth would come through her and try to describe what was inside the envelope using only clairvoyance.
It's classic remote viewing, really. Standard clairvoyant stuff.
Exactly. And in this particular session, session 225, Robert chose something very mundane but specific: a dentist appointment card.
A dentist card. Thrilling target.
But highly charged. It was his upcoming appointment card for Dr. Colucci. And Robert chose it specifically because he thought it would have strong emotional charges attached to it, since nobody really likes going to the dentist.
And that is a fair point. So Jane, or Seth, coming through, Jane starts giving her impressions of the hidden object. And this is where it gets really interesting for me, because they don't just say, oh, it's a white card. It's much more messy than that.
It is very messy, and that is exactly what makes it feel so authentic. If she just said it is a white appointment card from Dr. Colucci in Elmira, you would immediately suspect some kind of parlor trick. But instead, she gets this weird, scrambled burst of images.
Let's list what she actually got. He says, Madison Avenue. She says, a trip. A disturbing event in June of '64. The number 12. A round object. Another car. And finally, a hill.
On the surface, that sounds like a total miss. It sounds like she failed. What does Madison Avenue have to do with a local dentist in upstate New York?
Exactly. But then they bring it down after the session. And this is where we get to see how the subconscious mind actually processes clairvoyant data. It works almost entirely in emotional associations.
Let's start with the date she gave, June '64. Jane said a disturbing event in June '64. Robert checks their personal diaries. In May and June of 1964, Jane had a terribly swollen jaw and was absolutely terrified that she had to go to the dentist.
So the pure concept of dentist hidden in the envelope triggered the emotional memory of dentist fear from Jane's own past.
Exactly. The emotional charge connected the object to her memory.
What about the hill in the car? How does that fit in?
This is my favorite part of the scramble. Dr. Colucci, the dentist on the card, lived on a very steep hill. When Robert visited him previously, the dentist complained that he recently couldn't drive up his own driveway because of the winter ice.
Okay, I track that.
And Jane and Robert also recently had major car trouble on a steep hill. So the clairvoyant mind connected the concept of the dentist to the dentist's hill and then linked that to Jane's personal experience of car trouble on a hill.
It's like a bizarre game of telephone happening inside the brain.
Seth calls it a scrambling. He openly admits it. He says there was a merging here, or a scrambling, of valid information.
Let's look at the number 12. She got that specifically.
Right. The dentist's office address was 112 Walnut Street.
So the 1 and the 2 were there. But Jane said during the trance, I do not know whether this refers to 12 people or not.
Seth explains that confusion perfectly. He says the number 12 referred strictly to the address, but it got confused with the concept of people because a dentist's waiting room is full of people. So the data packet for the address 112 and the data packet for waiting room people just smashed together in her mind.
It makes so much sense when you lay it out like that. It's not a clear, high-definition picture. It's a raw burst of data. What about the round object?
Seth says the round object referred to the light.
The big light over the dental chair, of course. That is the most iconic, memorable thing you stare at when you are trapped at the dentist.
Exactly. It is the core visual symbol of the entire dental experience.
And then there is the Madison Avenue mistake. This one seems so far off base at first.
This is a fascinating glimpse into how the brain misfires when translating psychic data. Jane hears the words Madison Avenue in her head. She immediately thinks of her book publisher, Frederick Fell, whose office is in New York on Madison Avenue.
But why would the dentist card make her think of her publisher?
Seth explains that the publisher, Mr. Fell, had recently been suffering from severe throat difficulties.
Throat, mouth, dentist. Wow.
Bingo. The subconscious picked up the signal for a mouth or throat problem. It tried to match that pattern to something in Jane's memory bank. It found the publisher with throat trouble. The publisher is located on Madison Avenue, so the final conscious output became Madison Avenue.
That is incredible. It's totally incorrect on the surface, but the underlying logic of the error is absolutely perfect.
It shows that clairvoyance, or at least how Seth describes the mechanics of it, isn't about reading hidden text like a newspaper. It is about receiving these electromagnetic signals of emotion, symbol, and concept. And then the physical brain tries to translate those alien signals into English words. And sometimes the translation gets a little garbled along the way.
It's like using translation software on a highly nuanced poem. You get the general gist of the meaning, but the specific words get really weird.
Exactly. Seth says often quite legitimate associations such as these must be bypassed for more specific data. He is basically saying, my bad, I let the subconscious associations run wild instead of giving you the literal text.
But honestly, to me, the mistakes are almost more convincing than a direct hit would be. It shows the actual mechanism at work behind the scenes.
It demystifies the whole process. It's not magic. It is a process of signal interpretation.
So we have taken quite a journey in session 225 today. We started with Jane freaking out about living room chairs just to hide her racial guilt. We moved to the mind-bending idea that the past is a living, changing thing. And we ended with a practical demonstration of how the mind connects disparate ideas, dentists, icy hills, cars, and New York publishers, through invisible electromagnetic links.
It really all connects back to that one central theme. Reality is not what it looks like on the surface. The surface is just the chairs. Underneath, there are these massive, deep currents of emotion, guilt, time, and energy connecting absolutely everything.
The surface is just the chairs. I feel like that should be printed on a t-shirt.
It's a very good motto to live by.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what is the biggest takeaway for you from all of this?
For me, it is the profound empowerment of the fluid past. I think a lot of us feel defined or even trapped by our personal history. We say, I am this way because this bad thing happened to me. But if Seth is right, that bad thing is not a fixed point. We were recreating it right now.
Right.
And if we can change the energy of it today, we can fundamentally change who we are today.
We aren't just the survivors of our past. We are the active editors of it.
We are the editors and the writers and the directors.
And the chair panic story just reminds us to be kind to ourselves. When you find yourself freaking out about something totally trivial, maybe take a breath and ask, what is the real emotional furniture I am trying to rearrange here?
And maybe cut yourself some slack, because even highly attuned psychic mediums get social anxiety.
Absolutely true. Now, we have only really scratched the surface of this particular session. If you want to really get the full experience and understand the nuances we couldn't cover, you have to read the books for yourself.
Yes, we strongly encourage you to study the Seth material. This was just a tiny slice of the early sessions, Book 5.
You can find these books and a lot more at the New Awareness Network website. That is sethcenter.com, the early sessions. Go check it out. Support the publisher who does the work to keep this incredible material available to the public.
It is definitely worth the deep dive on your own.
But before we go, I want to leave you with one final thought based on that inverted time concept we discussed.
Let's hear it.
If a past is being changed by you right now, if your current emotions are actively rewriting the electromagnetic connections of your childhood, what specific memory could you look at differently today that might literally alter the person you were 10 years ago?
Are you just healing your inner child, or are you actually changing who they were?
Think about that. Thanks for diving deep with us today. We will see you in the next moment, or maybe the previous one. Who knows?
See you then.